and we never could answer was the fact that there is the children born around 1970. We suddenly realized or discovered that a lot of them would drink 1 or 2 beers, like 24 ounces, and they would go into psychosis, and they would attack people. But the moment they sobered up, they would return back to the way they were. And what we could not understand, and we could not explain, is was this a genetic thing, or we don't think it was a learned behavior, but we discovered that this whole generation of kids were becoming murderous.
Weird. Yeah, it could have very well been. We've seen other cases where suddenly there seems to be an epidemic of something, and it's not anything obvious unless you go back to the grandparents now and see that they were in a place where they were doing a lot of atomic bomb testing or something, or they suffered, we don't know what's going to be the downstream.
Boarding school?
Or boarding school, some stressor. We don't know what COVID is going to do 2 or 3 generations down, for example. So often you'll think like, well, what's wrong with these kids? What are they doing? Is it something genetic? Probably not, given the awful history of your people because of other people. It was probably something like that, right? Where if you go back 2 generations, 1 or 2 generations, and looked what those people were doing, maybe they were undergoing some severe stressor, right? Maybe the grandparents were.
Could have been something. The grandparents did not drink or did not use drugs.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that, right? It could just be a severe stressor that makes you more susceptible 2 generations later. It could have been like the diabetes of the famine case, right? So any kind of severe stressor, you don't pass on the trait, remember. You don't pass on that you love alcohol. You pass on maybe the capacity to seek out some stress reliever, or you pass it or something like that, right? Because of a traumatic incident. So maybe the earlier generations did. I have no idea. I'm just guessing.
Well, our question is, what's going to happen to the next generation? The kids born in the 90s, and we're discovering that a lot of them just do not use alcohol, but they're into drugs, which is totally even more strange and more, but
insidious.
Yeah. And the thing is, if it's a genetic code type thing, is there a marker, or have they developed markers where you look at someone and say, this is present?
Yeah, so we should be able to do all 3 things. We should be able to look at the genes, the epigenetics, and the psychological surveys and the behaviors, right? And together predict whether this person or that person is more likely to experience those things, right? That's the kind of direction that we're headed. It's tricky because like I said, the epigenetics is only giving you a potential. Even the genes only give you a potential. And you could do psychological surveys and maybe together make some predictions. That would be the hope. Ironically and weirdly, the first pioneers in this kind of work are always the military. Because the military wants to know, if I'm letting you in and fight for my country, are you gonna, be solid and not have any issues? So they're often the ones at the forefront trying to look at these predictable markers. But they may actually be useful for the rest of us too. A lot of good things come out of this research. So yeah, again, sorry I can't give you a better answer.
But isn't it also important to recognize in this analysis the fact that young people, the one that Arthur's talking about, are experiencing the rapes, the murders, and the disappearances of their mothers and their aunts and their grandmas and all of that. What's the impact of that in the traumas that they're experiencing today, not necessarily based on history and genetics?
Yes, of course. And all of those things are important. And this doesn't explain away any of that or help us just on the surface, right? It just gives us more tools to maybe address the evils and good of man, if you will. Just more tools, right? But of course, we're not going to stop doing all the good things Arthur was doing before when he worked with indigenous people. We're just hoping that we can come up with tools to help people that have problems or to make predictions about people. But of course, what's happening to them now, it's just that what's happening to you now, let's say it's more likely to happen to you if something's happened to your ancestors. That would be valuable information. Or your response to bad things might be related to things that have happened in the past, right? That's valuable information. But of course, we still don't want to do bad things. We don't want bad things to happen to good people, and we want to think about if they did, what we can do about it. Maybe that's a good note to end on. Thank y'all for coming.
On Jicarilla Apache ND in southern Utestolan land, Epigenetics talk with indigenous communities concerns with their youth.